Florida State fans, college football fans, maybe you missed this. I certainly did on Friday. And even if you didn't, like to get the take from Georgitis, the Renegade Report. So keep it right here, and we'll get you all caught up on what's going on concerning Florida State and the ACC. So the ACC lawsuit against Florida State has come to a temporary halt. North Carolina Chief Business Court Judge Louis Bledsoe III handed down a ruling. This is on Friday that puts a stay on all discovery and further court-related work on the case while Florida State appeals to the North Carolina Supreme Court. The school is appealing Bledsoe's earlier ruling that denied the school's motion to dismiss the case. Does this surprise you? Where do we stand? What is the next step? And I'll let you take it from here, George.
No, it's not a surprise. We kind of talked about it the prior Friday. Something was coming. We're going to get a kind of resolution there. We talked to Doug Rohan about it, talked to each other about it. It was kind of a win-win situation either way. But in my opinion, him coming out and ordering this stay, and if you read the document like we like to do, it's called sua sponte. And what that means is it describes an act of authority taken without formal prompting for another party. So basically, the judge decided, according to the law, and with Florida State's case going through the first part of appeals, they did all the right things in order to appeal the first ruling that he made. He felt it was in their best interest to just stop, freeze everything in North Carolina until the Supreme Court could rule on Florida State's appeal. The kind of significance there is that Florida State's case in Leon County is taking a bit longer. So Florida State got a win there. Okay, there the judge and Florida Judge Cooper threw out the ACC's motion to stay. Basically, these two cases are reciprocals of each other. So Florida State being the defendant in North Carolina and the plaintiff in Florida. So there was a real chance that if the appeal didn't go through for whatever case, he ruled it to move forward to discovery in the next phases of this case in North Carolina. You have a real issue of North Carolina finishing before Florida. And we all know, in the world of litigation, I guess not all of us, but I'm learning slowly but surely the more and more I talk to these lawyers, it is a race. It was a race to the courthouse. And now there's kind of a thing you could find yourself in a position where it's North Carolina racing Florida to see who gets the decision out, because that decision, and there's some more Latin that Doug Rohan could reel off for you when you speak about that. But, judges everywhere, lawyers, they kind of have to listen to the precedent when a judge makes a decision. So that's the biggest thing. It's pretty much locks both of them up. We're locked up in Florida, and now we're locked up in North Carolina until the Supreme Court can fill it up or figure things out. Basically, what's happened is there's really no chance. If you talk to anybody and they tell you there's a chance of this litigation being settled before August 15th, it's just not going to happen. The only kind of opportunity you have for something to change and break free in this case, where we're going to get an actual ruling, get to this, and get to that. It just would be these guys sitting down and making a deal outside of court. Mediation isn't happening. Mediation got ordered in Florida, but of course, both parties down there, they lobbied against it, and so there's just more and more roadblocks coming up. But as of right now, in Florida and in North Carolina, everything's pretty much on ice as we wait for Florida State's amended filing in the state of Florida, and we wait for the Supreme Court of Appeals in North Carolina to move forward.
So the situation in Florida even takes us a step further than where we were a couple of weeks ago when Florida State was given that 1 week to revise its case. And then once that was presented, the ACC was going to have 3 weeks to respond. So we even got past that marker and it's on hold.
Well, here's the issue. So it sounded really nice in court. Judge Cooper, what he ruled is that Florida State had 7 days, not counting weekends, to file in an amended filing. But the issue is the way things go through, the way things get put in the system. So I'm not sure if we spoke about it Wednesday or if we found out after we had gone off the show, but just Wednesday, we finally got the very first order from Judge Cooper, the very first order in which he denied the ACC stay, their motion to stay. The part that we got to where Florida State had to redo their suit, where they had to refile, was the motion to dismiss, ACC's motion to dismiss. Somewhere in the jurisdiction, a paragraph in there where they make their case for the jurisdiction to be in Florida, there was something that wasn't up to par. So Judge Cooper said, look, you have that 7 days that you brought up that I mentioned. Well, that 7 days didn't even start until we finally get that order. So now that 7 days has got pushed back. So whenever that finally happens, we're hoping maybe next week, which would be literally like 20 days out from when the 7-day order came out, that would get put in. And once that gets put in, then you have to wait for that to make it through the system and for the order to actually be official through Tallahassee and all this. So we're a long ways out, like maybe August, September, like literally of getting to the point where we get back to hearing these things in Judge Cooper's court. And then from the next step to there, it's a long way down the road. In North Carolina, he didn't do it the way he did in Florida. In North Carolina, he heard all the arguments on all the motions from both sides, and he did one ruling. He came out with one ruling, and that was it. Okay, Florida State wins this one, they lose this one, they lose this one. North Carolina wins this one, and Florida State, of course, decided to go appeal it, and that's what we sit there. But yeah, in the state of Florida, all we got through was the motion to stay. We still had the motion to dismiss and the motion for discovery. Like, we didn't even start discovery. So yeah, we're still stuck in the motion to dismiss portion of the original filing, and that's, and again, just, I'm sorry to throw another layer on top of this, but Florida State withholds the right to change the entire case. They've got the right to change everything, not just that jurisdiction part within that motion to dismiss. So in all effect, we could be starting completely over again in the state of Florida. And that would allow, again, for the ACC to file another motion to stay in the state of Florida. So we could even have to do that over again. So it's just, we've come to a bitter kind of settlement, whatever we've landed on the fact that it's the litigation is going to be a long way. The process we thought maybe could be quick and you could have something before September, or maybe just a year. No, it's looking like if for this thing to play out in the courts, it would take a minimum of like 2 years type thing. And you're looking at possibly longer. That's what it's turning to. We've talked all along. Nobody really thought it was going to go the distance, but we thought we would get maybe to discovery, get to a point where the pressure builds and it really puts the pressure on the parties to get in a room and settle. Well, it's really looking more and more like it's just going to be that February 2025 date. For those who aren't sure, I'm sure most of the people watching this already know, but ESPN has until February of 2025 to decide whether they want to extend this grant of rights. Kind of what's in question by Florida State. The ACC claims to own Florida State and the rest of the conference members' rights through 2036. But again, that's what the court case is all about. Arguing a war of words there because, this grant of rights, it's got ESPN all over it. ESPN all over it. According to the ACC, that doesn't matter. They can make it, we can make this thing, we can sell the rights to whoever we want, CBS, NBC, it doesn't matter. The grant of rights is between the ACC and the schools, but our position, Clemson's position, is that this grant of rights is just between ESPN. That's it. Anybody else, if ESPN goes away, the grant of rights, everybody's free from the grant of rights, and that's it. Everybody's locked up through 2027. That's a fact. That's a done deal. But they have till February again of 2025 to decide if they want to extend this deal out from 2028 to 2036. And that's the date, But I'm sure you probably have a million questions. I know I kind of went all over the place there.
We appreciate George being here from the Renegade Report. George is there all week, all the time, whatever it is regarding Florida State football, on the field, off the field, in the courtrooms. He's there all the time. So we appreciate George. Get on over to Renegade Report. So my first thought is, now that both court cases in those two states, North Carolina and Florida, are in the same spot, is there reason for optimism that, as you state, there's a race to the finish line, and now North Carolina is in the same position as Florida, that the Florida outcome is going to come sooner? Is there any reason to believe that?
If I had the faith that somehow they were going to get together, the clerks and the judge and the state's attorney and everybody, and say, okay, we're going to put this thing to the top of the pile. We're not going to do it business as usual. It's actually going to be 7 days and then 20 days. I don't see that happening. No, I don't. I think, we're a long ways out from Florida. Judge Bledsoe stayed this thing in North Carolina. That's big. I kind of feel like it's even, just because that case was moving so much faster. That's kind of why I said they're in the same place, even though the case has actually stayed in North Carolina and not stayed in Florida, just the kind of how we've seen these things rolling and happening in the state of Florida. The ACC is going to have the same opportunity to appeal. So, whether they win it or not, at the end of the day, on both sides, I feel like it's going to be a long time, unfortunately. The wild hair there, the fly in the ointment is the Clemson case in South Carolina, because they have done a much better job than either FSU or the ACC in getting their case through pretty fastly. So we're going to keep a close eye. I'm going to try to talk to some different lawyers. Haven't seen many Clemson lawyers that have come out and really discussed their case. Hasn't been near as much coverage. But again, with 6 kind of cases going on at once, or 6 sides, 3 different cases, 6 different sides, they're all playing off each other, especially FSU and Clemson, because everything Clemson's lawsuit, it was sharpened off of Florida State's complaints and what they saw go down. And as I said, seems like they're on a much faster track. So if Clemson could resolve theirs, if they could get theirs done, if they could come to some sort of agreement there, maybe that could speed it up. Maybe that could make a change in one state or the other. But as it stands, it's pretty much just, we're at a standstill.
Is it actually 4 court cases and 8 sides? Doesn't Clemson have a 2-front battle as well?
So you've got, I don't believe there has been a case started in North Carolina with Clemson yet. I could be mistaken on that. As far as I know, there's just the case in South Carolina, Clemson versus the ACC. And then you've got FSU versus the ACC in Florida. Okay, I see what you're saying. So if you count if you count the Supreme Court, 8.
So George, you had stated
4 different cases.
You stated that Florida State now has the opportunity to rework its case, approach it differently, based on your conversations with your lawyer friends and who you've been in contact with. Is there a reason for Florida State to do that?
Oh, for sure. That's like the first thing I asked Doug. The people that got to watch it, or if you kind of watched any of our summaries, the judge was really kind of trying to pull Mr. Rush down the right road, or he could kind of adjust it on the fly right there in the courtroom, or kind of, just, aren't you trying to say this? Yeah. And then we could have been fine. He was like really trying not to dismiss this thing. He was trying everything he could not to approve the motion to dismiss. But it was in a situation where Mr. Rush was like, maybe I'm not prepared to go down that route for whatever reason. They weren't. This is how they wrote it up. But Mr. Rush did make the comment, Mr. Judge, we will go back. We'll go right back there to a recess room. We'll change that one paragraph. We will get it fixed up. We'll come back here in a week's time or whatever, no problem, and go right back at it with another court date. Well, then, well, there was a little bit of hemming and hawing between the ACC, and it's like, no, we're not going to do that. If you get to change the jurisdictional part, we want our full opportunity for our 20 days and to go through the whole thing. We don't want to rush through it and rush back. So then Florida State's position became, Mr. Rush's position became, okay, well, then we withhold the right to change every motion from the top to bottom, as I explained earlier. And so that's the case. If they're going to make, give us the 7 days, and then, well, the ACC is going to have another 20 days to prepare after that. They said, okay. So we don't know for a fact. I haven't spoke with Mr. Rush. I haven't spoke with members of Florida State's law team exactly what they will change. But similar to what I explained with Clemson, Florida State and the law team now has the benefit of the knowledge of the North Carolina versus Florida State case, the goings on in the appeal in the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and what's going on in the Clemson ACC case in South Carolina. So all that knowledge and all the rulings thus far, I'm sure, will weigh into this, and they will definitely be able to alter, just like a game. You go watch the film and you had these issues, the judge called you out for this. They're going to be able to go in there and tighten that up and kind of, remove parts here and add parts there. But I half expect something brand new that nobody saw, like another, maybe they pull another, ace out of the hole. I just really feel like with such a limited ability to kind of move this thing forward and how slow it is going to go, they'll come out swinging with that. So really can't wait till we get our hands on that. Again, hopefully next week. I heard Doug say that. I'm just copying what he said. I really have no idea. It's sad to say, and I hate that I have to explain it this way, but it's just kind of how the Florida courts work. The judge even explained multiple times. He was candid, saying, like, look, when you do your amended filing, please email it to me. Because if you don't email it to me, if you try to send it through through the state's portal or the state's email, it's going to take an extra 2 or 3 days to get there. And all these things. I'm sure everybody's, had this issue before where you send something in, pay a ticket or whatever, and it doesn't post till some, time down the road. That's just kind of what we're dealing with. But yeah.
We had a conversation earlier today with Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. That was concerning UCLA has a situation with the UC Board of Regents and a penalty that they could possibly have to pay for leaving the Big Ten, and leaving the California educational system and so forth. And that's where I found out from Tony referencing this case that something had broke on Friday. And in the midst of that, Tony made the comment that seems to fall in line with your February date, that he has some connections with some people within the Florida State court system that are predicting that February 2025 date to be when this finally gets heard.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, like I said, that is the big day. Any and all leverage that FSU or the ACC has, basically the ACC has, is wrapped around that. Once ESPN goes public with we're not extending it, it could all fall apart for them right there, and they may not get a dime. So it's my opinion that, as we approach closer to that February 2025 date, maybe you see a settlement, maybe something gets them in a room, but all roads lead to there.
And so then the next thought for me is that Florida State wants to leave the ACC as soon as possible. I would think, unless the ACC uncovers something that they just think is a hidden gem that they can pull out of their hip pocket and is the ace in the hole to win this case or get themselves off the hook to a certain extent. Otherwise, I would think that they would, except for paying lawyers and all the legal fees involved, that they want to drag this out as long as possible because they keep Florida State and Clemson in the league and make money off of them, I would think.
There's so many different ways to look at it, but there is no doubt they want to keep us in the league every year they possibly can. And that's kind of why we're here right now. I think they know they're not going to keep us past 2027 whatsoever in any kind of fantasy dreamland. So I think that's their ultimate goal, is to somehow get Florida State to stay through 2027. The original idea a couple last year leading up to now was if we can just convince ESPN that we can sell ESPN or sell FSU and Clemson long term, we can go through 2036. But it's my opinion, not speaking to anybody, but just I don't think ESPN's ever going to sign the deal. I think they get it. We even had today more comments come out from a UNC. I'm not sure. I could look it up. Chancellor or a board of trustees member or something, speaking about how they have got to. It's their plan and their best interest to go move up to a higher conference. It's just where we are right now. So yeah, that's just where it's at. As far as them kind of like trying to drag it out through the courts, I think Florida State's already mentioned trying to get their kind of wanting to leave the ACC backdated to 2023 to weasel around that date that you have, because you have to, again, another date, September 15th. That would be the date that you would have to notify the ACC you're leaving in order to be in a new conference the next year. So for us to play in the Big Ten by 2025, we would have to notify the ACC by September 15th. Before then, September 15th, midnight. It's a year removed. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize with these conference conversations. Whenever you hear a school come out and say, all right, we're done, we're moving to such and such conference, that's a year in advance. Where are they going with that? It's a year in advance. So are they going to backdate it to 23 to where Florida State could play in 2024? No way. It's not going to happen. Nobody believes so. But with the fact that Florida State's already engaged in litigation and we're going back and forth, there is a non-zero chance that they could, announce their commitment before 9/15. Saw people asking if there's a reason to do this until something happens at the court. No, there's not. And there's a reason that the Florida State hasn't announced their intentions to leave, because it would technically put them in breach of their contract and all these things would go. That's why they're in court arguing it. But I think most likely they don't announce until after the day goes by. But with everything going on, they attempt to get it backdated to where they can be in another conference by 2025. But from the very outset, that was going to be your best case scenario was 2025. And the longer this thing gets pushed and the longer they're able to continue it towards that February 2025 date, it's looking more and more like 2026.
Florida State is leaving the ACC, everyone. For me, what it comes down to is when, where they're going, and how much money are they going to have to pay once they do leave. Those are the three big questions to be answered. And I know that my next statement's not going to necessarily concern a lot of Florida State fans, but I think it's intriguing to me because I know that Florida State and Clemson have landing spots without question. North Carolina should be safe. They should be fine. They have plenty of pros on their side to land in a good conference, and Miami should as well. After that, I've got to think that there's a lot of locations like North Carolina State, Louisville. Those are the first two that come to mind that are on that next tier where they're decent football brands. They have a lot to bring to the table, but they're not that safe. They're probably trying to do their best to kind of read the tea leaves and see how this is going to break, and probably have a lot of connections in other conferences to try to read how much they are attractive to the Big Ten or the SEC or the Big 12 if they have to go there. So I'm interested to see how the ACC is able to stabilize itself. It's obviously added 3 other schools to try to weather this, knowing that they wouldn't go out and add a bunch of schools if they had Florida State and Clemson, a bunch of marginal schools, but they did. And they're probably just going to have to try to maintain some semblance of a league to some degree. But again, because I think we're pretty secure on what Florida State's future is going to be, just where is it, when is it, and how much. The rest of the league's going to be quite intriguing to me to see how it all plays out for other schools.
Without a doubt. And I've got this pulled up, and this was reported by Brett McMurphy just a few hours ago. UNC trustee Dave Boliak is advocating, and he put that in quotes, for UNC to join a higher revenue league. That's what we need to do, Boliak said. We need to do everything we can to get there. Or the alternative is the ACC is going to have to reconstruct itself. I think all options are on the table. Now, you can take that, I think, or the alternative is the ACC is going to have to reconstruct itself for what it's worth. I think that's basically just him tempering it with, pigs could possibly fly, but that's probably not going to happen. As he just kind of alluded to, there are some decent properties there. If Florida State and Clemson leaves, if they don't have a handle on it, if they haven't already reached out to the Big 12, for example, and talk about working something out between the two leagues, whether it be a merger or an AFC, NFC situation, then the league it'll probably just die. You'll probably get some folks go to the Big 12, some maybe do the ACC2 thing for a year or two until they can get a spot. But I just don't see how you can do anything else than like a relegation 2 or a group of 2 with the Big 12 or the ACC, or they combine. But the issue is without a Florida State and a Clemson or a Notre Dame, you combine them and it's just, they don't have the top 15 programs to kind of validate playoff entries and thing of that nature outside of, what you get with the group of 5 now, 1 or 2 maybe people in the 12-team playoff. Those meetings from the college football playoff and the SEC and the Big Ten getting the 3 automatic selections and stuff starting whenever that starts, that was pretty much, it just spelled the end for the ACC. When they agreed to that, they basically said we're a lesser league. The words from UNC, those cut the deepest. Florida State is obviously Clemson. They're the powerhouses as far as football and stuff like that. But for a UNC who would be the center of whatever you're going to do for basketball, they're also trying to do better in football. They've been wanting to, this whole thing started with Skipper talking, not Skipper, that's ESPN, Swafford. You can go read clippings of him in the 80s talking about how you got to be forward thinking. Even ACC was the highest paid. They were the richest conference in all the land when basketball was king. But Swafford was saying, we got to look forward. The real money's going to be in these football contracts. I'm telling you, these football TV, and we got to be ahead. And they were. In the beginning, there was a time when the ACC and the SEC were neck and neck for the most money. When we went to the ACC, it's because they were paying the most. They were flush with cash. Somewhere along the line, he decided he was done. He didn't want to take risks anymore, and he wanted to get his nest egg and hit the road. So luckily, we have some younger people in some positions. I'm not a big fan of the head man of the league, but a guy like Michael Alford at Florida State, Mike Norvell at the helm of the football team, and apparently the guys at North Carolina are having a change of heart too. So between that and Clemson and everybody else, the ACC, its days are numbered in its current form. We'll see. We'll see if they can survive. It's the way they've moved the past 10, 15 years and how they're acting now. It's looking more like the way of the Pac-12.
Folks, get on over to the Renegade Report. When's the next live show, George?
We have got a live show starting in about 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's going to be 3 hours and something like that. 9:15 Eastern, 8:15 Central. It's the Renegade Roast with Jen Santee and Tiny Hat, CEO. So get on over there to the Renegade Report and check that out. And then we'll have the Renegade Rundown, our regular Florida State football show, will be Tuesday at 7 Eastern, unless something changes.
We get together on Wednesday right here at the Voice of College Football, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. George, thanks for stopping by and straightening us out on all this.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.